She walked out of reform school with $71, a criminal record she didn't deserve, and nowhere to go. Then she took a leap, bought a $100 farm. Sight unseen, hoping to start over. But buried beneath the soil, she didn't just find roots. She found $2 million in cold, forgotten cash. What came next? A choice no one expected, one that would define who she really was. Before we begin, if you believe second chances are real, subscribe and drop a comment to tell us where in the world you're watching from. Willa Stanton was 24 the day she stepped out of Clearwater Reform School with nothing but a duffel bag, a worn-out pair of boots, and $71 crumpled in her back pocket. The steel gates slammed shut behind her like a final sentence. But she didn't flinch. She didn't look back. There was nothing back there worth remembering, just 3 long years locked away for something she didn't do. She had been a quiet girl before all of it, hard-working, saving up from 2 part-time jobs, dreaming of vet school. She loved animals because they didn't lie. They trusted you if you were kind. But one night, the people she thought were her friends invited her to a party and handed her a future she didn't deserve. The trial was a blur. The betrayal cut deep. And when the judge read her sentence, she lost everything. But what broke her wasn't the prison bars. It was the news that came months before her release. Her grandfather, Walter Stanton, had passed. He'd raised her since she was 15, taught her that doing the right thing mattered, especially when no one was watching. She didn't know it then, but soon she'd face a test that would prove whether she truly believed that. The first night out of reform school, Willa Stanton slept on a thin cot at a shelter in Missoula, Montana. The room smelled like bleach and exhaustion. She lay there staring at the ceiling while the soft snores of strangers filled the dark. Sleep didn't come. Her mind was a spinning wheel of grief and fear. She had no home, no job, and the world outside felt louder, colder, faster than she remembered. But the next morning, she did what her grandfather had taught her. She got up anyway. She walked to the public library, one of the last places left in the world that didn't care who you were or what you'd done. Just rows of books, free internet, and quiet. She spent hours there, scouring job boards, housing listings, any sign of a lifeline. Everything required references or clean records, things she didn't have. And then, at the bottom of a grainy website, she saw it. An auction. One photo. A sagging farmhouse with ivy strangling the porch and a crooked barn in the distance. Starting bid $100. 40 acres of abandoned farmland in a town she had never heard of. Grafton, Montana. Population 609. She stared at the listing. Most people would have seen decay, collapse, and years of back-breaking work. But Willa saw something else, a place where nobody knew her name, a place she could vanish and maybe start again. It was crazy. She didn't know the first thing about farming, but she knew how to work hard, and she was out of options. The auction had 2 days left. No one had bid. Every day after that, Willa came back to the library the minute it opened. She stared at that listing like it might reach through the screen and give her purpose. By the final hour, her palms were sweating. The bid was still at $100. She had $71. She stared at the screen, her heart thudding in her chest. If she did this, she'd have nothing left, no backup plan, no safety net, just a run-down piece of land and a gut feeling. But she could hear her grandfather's voice in her head again. "You only get one life, Willa. Don't play it safe so long you forget how to live." She took a breath. Borrowed $29 from a kind soul at the shelter who believed in second chances. And she clicked place bid. 60 seconds. Then the screen flashed. Congratulations. You are the winning bidder. She laughed and cried at the same time. She had done it. She owned a farm. But the celebration was short-lived. A fine print at the bottom of the page: back taxes and fees due within 30 days, $1,345. If not paid, the county would reclaim the property. No exceptions. Willa stared at the number until her vision blurred. She had less than nothing now. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. The next day, she woke up before the sun and started working any job she could find. She hauled crates at a warehouse on the edge of town, scrubbed dishes in a truck stop diner, sorted recycling at a stinking plant where the manager didn't ask questions, cash under the table, 12-hour days. She slept 2 or 3 hours at a time, ate peanut butter from a jar, and stretched every penny like a miracle. She didn't complain. Each shift, she repeated the same words under her breath: "This land is mine. I'm gonna earn it." At night, when her body was too sore to move, she'd hold her breath and imagine what it might feel like to stand on her own land, to plant something, to build something, to sleep without fear. 27 days later, she returned to the county clerk's office with a manila envelope full of crumpled bills and sweat-stained hope. The woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "Paying in cash?" Willa nodded. All of it. An hour later, with trembling hands, she signed the last form and took the deed. 40 acres in Grafton. A broken house. A barn leaning like it had given up. But it was hers. She rode a greyhound through pine forests and fading towns. As the bus pulled into Grafton, her stomach twisted. The air smelled like dirt and pine and something old, something waiting. She walked the last 2 miles with her bag slung over one shoulder. Her boots sank into soft gravel, her legs aching with every step. And when she finally stood in front of the house, the one from the photo, it looked even worse in person. Shutters hung like broken wings. The front door had a hole in it. The barn looked like it might collapse with a strong wind. The field was a jungle of weeds. She sat on the front steps and let the weight of it all crash down. She was alone. She was broke. She didn't know what the hell she was doing. Tears welled up. Her throat closed. But she remembered her grandfather's voice again. "You get 10 minutes to cry. Then you get up and get to work." She checked her watch. 10 minutes. No more, no less. She stood up, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the barn, toward whatever came next. The third morning on the farm, Willa Stanton woke to the sharp cry of crows and the aching chill of Montana air slipping through the cracks in the barn walls. Her muscles burned from days of clearing brush and hauling out rotten boards. She had spent 2 nights sleeping on the barn floor with nothing but a flannel jacket between her and the cold earth. But for the first time in years, the pain felt earned, honest. After a breakfast of canned beans, she grabbed a rusted shovel she'd found buried under hay and wandered toward the back edge of the property. That's where the wild thorns grew thickest, as if the land itself was trying to hide something. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to feel useful. But the way the vines clustered in one spot caught her eye. A strange mound, low and long, half swallowed by creeping weeds and blackberry brambles. Curious, she began digging. The soil here was different, softer, as if something had been buried long ago. She thought maybe it was an old drainage pipe or part of a foundation. But after 20 minutes of digging, her shovel struck metal. A dull clunk. Not junk, not farm equipment. Something box-shaped. She dropped to her knees and began brushing away the dirt with her hands. Her breath caught in her throat. A steel container, rusted around the edges but solid, heavy. She stared at it, heart racing. It looked like something that had been hidden deliberately, not abandoned, the kind of thing someone meant to keep buried. There was no lock, just a latch sealed shut by years of soil and time. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. Inside were bundles of cash, wrapped in brittle paper bands, some crisp, some yellowed with age. Beneath the cash, layers of canvas and wax paper. Beneath that, more bundles, tightly packed, row after row. She counted. $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, more. She stopped counting at $2 million. Willa staggered back, her legs giving out. She sat in the dirt, staring at the box like it might vanish. Her hands were shaking. She looked around the empty field. No one. No sound but the wind through the tall grass. No cameras. No witnesses. She could take it. No one would ever know. She had nothing. No job, no running water, no future. And now she was holding more money than she had ever seen in her life. Dug straight out of the soil on a piece of land she legally owned. Her first thought, I can fix everything. Fix the house. Buy real equipment. Start a business. Never go hungry again. But then her grandfather's voice. Willa, doing the right thing matters most when no one's watching. And no one was watching. That was the thing. She could keep it. Live comfortably for the first time since she was 17. She could be safe, secure, powerful. But whose money was this? Who buried it? Why? And why hadn't they come back for it? She looked down at her dirt-caked boots, then back at the box. There were papers tucked beneath the last layer of bills. She pulled them out, careful not to tear anything. A few yellowed documents. A name, barely legible on an old ledger. Silas Rowan. She remembered seeing that name scratched into the side of the barn near the loft. Whoever Silas was, he had a reason for hiding this. This wasn't stolen cash. It looked like it had been saved, packed, preserved. A letter fell out from between 2 pages. If this box is ever found, please know I did what I had to. The banks failed me. The doctors bled me dry. But this is what I managed to protect. For my family. For this land. Silas. Willa pressed her palm to her forehead. Her thoughts were spinning. The money wasn't just valuable. It was meant for someone else. But what if they were gone? What if there was no family left? And still, the question lingered. What kind of person do I want to be? She stood up, staring at the box like it was a mirror reflecting her choices back at her. She could lie, hide it, say she never found anything, build a life on buried secrets. Or she could do something terrifying. Tell the truth. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the barn, the box beside her, the letter in her lap, and a decision weighing heavier than the soil she'd dug through. She had walked out of reform school with nothing but shame and a broken past. Now she had a chance not just for survival, but for integrity. And in her heart, she knew if she kept that money, she'd never truly be free. Willa Stanton had made hard decisions before. She'd walked into a courtroom with her chin high, while people who once called her a friend pointed at her like she was a stranger. She'd stood in front of a parole board and told the truth, knowing it wouldn't change their minds. But this was different. No one would have blamed her for keeping the money. No one even knew it existed. She had dug it out of the ground with her own hands. On land she legally owned. And yet, she couldn't unhear her grandfather's voice. Doing right only matters when it costs you something. The next morning, she took the letter signed by Silas Rowan and walked into town. Grafton wasn't much one blinking traffic light. A diner that smelled like fried onions and burnt coffee. and a post office that doubled as a general store. But it had people. People who knew this land. People who might know who Silas was. She entered the diner first. The waitress behind the counter was in her 60s. Silver hair pulled tight in a braid. Eyes sharp as glass. "You lost, sweetheart?" she asked. Willa hesitated. "I just bought the old farm north of town. I found something. A name. Silas Rowan. Does that mean anything to you?" The woman blinked. Her expression softened just a little. "Silas Lord. Yeah. That man was half this town once. Owned 3 parcels up Ridge Creek. Good man. Quiet. Real private. Died years ago. Cancer. I think." "Did he have any family?" Willa asked. The woman tilted her head. "Kids left town after his wife died. Nobody's heard from them since. There's a daughter, Mary Ann. Maybe used to live in Spokane. Why? I just found something of his. I want to return it." The woman looked at her differently now, more curious, maybe even respectful. "Check with Dottie at the records office. She might have a trail." Willa spent the rest of the day chasing names through whispers and yellowed files. Every door she knocked on brought her closer. Old yearbooks, church rosters, property records. By sundown, she had an address. Mary Ann Rowan Bishop, Spokane, Washington. She stared at it on the page like it might disappear. All she had to do was pick up the phone, or write a letter, or get on a bus and hand the box over. But her fingers refused to move. What if Mary Ann didn't want it? What if she thought Willa had stolen it? What if no one believed her? Willa walked back to the farm in silence. The wind was picking up, blowing dust down the long gravel road. The barn stood like a shadow waiting for her. Inside, she opened the box again. $2 million. She could change her life, pay off the taxes, fix the roof, get clean water, heat, power. She could plant crops, buy livestock, even give back to the town. She didn't need all of it. Maybe just a little. Just enough. Her hand hovered over one of the stacks. But then she pictured Mary Ann, an older woman opening a mailbox one morning to find a letter that said, "Your father didn't forget you." That image hurt more than hunger ever had, because Willa knew what it felt like to be left behind. She had spent years thinking her own family had abandoned her. The worst part of prison wasn't the cold or the silence. It was thinking the one person who loved her, her grandfather, had died while she was locked away, and she never got to say goodbye. She wouldn't do that to someone else. Not if she could help it. That night, she didn't cry. Instead, she wrote a letter. "Dear Mary Ann, you don't know me, but I think I found something that belongs to you. Your father buried a box on the property I just bought. It has money in it more than I can even wrap my head around. But more than that, it has his name, his story, a letter written to whoever found it. He saved this for you. He hoped you'd come back, and I think you should have it." She signed it with her full name, her phone number, and the address of the farm. Then she placed the letter inside the box, resealed it, and sat beside it until the sun rose. The next day, she mailed it, certified, registered, with shaking hands, and for the first time in a long time, Willa Stanton felt free. Not because she had money, but because she had done something no one expected her to do, not even herself. She had chosen right over easy. She had chosen honor over hunger. And in that moment, she stopped being the girl with a record and started becoming someone new. The days after mailing the letter passed slowly, each one stretching like taffy across the Montana sky. Willa Stanton tried to keep her hands busy clearing vines, patching the roof with scrap wood, hauling out broken furniture from the house, but her mind always returned to that box, and to the woman she had written to. What if Mary Ann never answered? What if the letter never arrived? What if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by giving away the only shot she had at survival? The doubts came in waves. especially at night when the wind howled through the cracks in the barn, like voices whispering all her worst fears. But she stayed. She worked. She waited. And then 14 days after she sent the letter, her phone rang. The number was unknown. Willa stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Her voice barely came out. Hello? A pause. Then is this Willa Stanton? The voice was soft, tired. This is Marianne. Marianne Rowan Bishop. Willa swallowed. Yes, hi. I wasn't sure You found my father's box, Marianne said, her voice catching. I didn't believe it when I read your letter. I thought it had to be a scam or a mistake. But then I saw his handwriting, and the way you wrote about him. I knew it was real. There was silence between them for a moment. Charged. And full. Can I come? Marianne asked. To the farm. I'd like to see it. And meet you. Willa blinked fast. Yes. Of course. Please. 2 days later, a dusty blue sedan pulled into the overgrown drive. Marianne stepped out wearing jeans and a cardigan, her silver hair twisted up in a clip. She was in her early 60s, with soft eyes that looked like they had once held more light than sorrow. Willa met her at the edge of the barn, the box clutched tight in her arms. They didn't speak right away. They just looked at each other. Then Marianne reached out not for the money, but for Willa's hand. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. Not just for this, but for believing he still mattered. Willa opened the box slowly, revealing the neat stacks of bills and the folded letter. Marianne ran her fingers over the pages like they were old photographs of someone she thought she'd lost. He was never good with words, she whispered. But he saved this. For me. For us. She looked up. He never said goodbye, and I spent years thinking he just let go. But he didn't. Willa stepped back. It's all yours. I didn't touch a cent. Marianne closed the box. You could have, and no one would have known. But you didn't. And that says everything. They sat on the barn steps, watching the sun begin its slow descent behind the hills. The light turned everything gold. You remind me of him, Marianne said softly. Stubborn, quiet, a little lost but still standing. Willa laughed. That's probably the kindest way anyone's ever described me. That night, Marianne didn't go back to Spokane. She stayed. In the morning, she brought out an envelope thick and heavy. Willa frowned. What's this? Marianne handed it to her. A gift. My father saved this money for a second chance. And maybe you're the one it was really meant for. Willa shook her head. No, I didn't earn that. Yes, you did, Marianne said. You earned it when you chose to do right, when you could have chosen easy. She smiled gently. But if you won't take all of it, take some. Let it help you. Let it grow into something. Inside the envelope was $40,000 more than Willa had ever held in her life. She cried for the first time in weeks, not because of the money, but because someone had seen her, really seen her, and said, You deserve to begin again. Over the next few months, Willa and Marianne rebuilt the farmhouse room by room. Marianne didn't stay long, just enough to help stabilize the foundation, both literal and emotional. But before she left, she introduced Willa to her son, a quiet man named Elliot, who ran a hardware store in Missoula. He came out every weekend to help with repairs. He brought lumber, tools, and eventually, coffee. A lot of coffee. He didn't talk much at first, just worked beside her in silence. But over time, they found a rhythm two people patched together by grief, rebuilding something neither of them expected to find. By spring, Willa had running water, a working kitchen, and seedlings growing in the sun. The farm had a name now, Rowan's Hope, a tribute to the man who buried treasure not for himself, but for what he believed the future could still hold. And Willa. She had something she never thought she'd feel again. A beginning. Willa Stanton was no longer the girl who walked out of reform school clutching a duffel bag and a fractured past. By the time the first wildflowers bloomed across the edge of her field, she had changed slowly, painfully, honestly. It didn't happen all at once. Growth never does. It crept in like morning light through a dusty window, soft, steady, unnoticed until everything looked different. She woke before sunrise each day. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The land had become her rhythm. The blistered hands that once trembled with fear now moved with confidence. She built shelves, patched floors, learned to fix a leaking pipe with YouTube tutorials and borrowed tools. She memorized the way rain smelled when it meant good news. The difference between weeds and hope in the soil. The sound of silence when it was peaceful, not empty. The house still creaked. The barn still leaned. But they stood. And so did she. Every morning, she'd pour a cup of coffee and sit on the steps of her half-finished porch. Sometimes Marianne called. Sometimes Elliot came by with fresh lumber and that crooked little smile he wore like armor. They didn't talk about what she'd been through, not unless she brought it up. And slowly, Willa started to. She told Elliot about the night she was arrested, how the room had gone quiet as the police burst in, how her so-called friends had vanished out the back door while she sat frozen on the couch, soda in hand. No idea what was happening. She told him about the trial, the public defender who barely looked at her, the judge who looked through her, the silence of people who once claimed they'd always be there. And she told him about her grandfather, how he taught her to hammer nails straight and speak the truth, even when her voice shook. Elliot listened, really listened. And when she cried, he didn't rush to fix it. He just sat with her, the way people do when they understand what it means to lose and still stay standing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Willa showed him the last untouched corner of the barn, the place where she'd found the box. "I was a different person before that day," she said quietly. "I think part of me came up from the ground with it." Elliot smiled. "Maybe it wasn't the money that changed your life. Maybe it was the decision." Willa didn't answer right away, but she thought about that all night. And she knew he was right. It wasn't the $2 million that rebuilt her. It was the moment she decided not to keep it. That was the turning point. The moment she stopped being the girl the world told her she was and started becoming the woman she wanted to be. She began to share her story first, just with neighbors. Then at the local library's open mic night. People were stunned. Some cried. Some hugged her afterward. One man, an old farmer with weathered hands, just nodded and said, "That took guts." Willa started keeping a journal again. At first, it was just to track planting dates and repairs, but it turned into something more. Her own story, her own truth, written in her own words. In town, things changed too. The people who once eyed her with suspicion now waved when she drove by. The diner put her photo on the wall. Local hero turns farm around. A schoolteacher asked if she'd come speak to her students about resilience. It stunned Willa, not because she didn't think the story mattered, but because for the first time she believed she did, and she began to dream again. Dreams that weren't about survival, but about building something lasting. She started a community garden along the southern edge of the property-free plots for anyone in town who wanted to grow something. Retirees, single moms, teenagers looking for a break from a hard home life. They came, they dug, they grew, and they healed. Willa gave away vegetables, shared coffee on the porch with strangers who became friends. repaired fences, listened, cared. The girl who once thought she was broken beyond repair had become a cornerstone, not because she'd been given a second chance, but because she had created one with her own hands, her own choices, her own heart. And the most surprising thing, she had begun to forgive, not just the people who hurt her, but herself. Because now, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a victim, or a girl with a record, or someone who got lucky when she found a box of money buried in the dirt. She saw someone who had stood at the crossroads of right and easy. And chose right. 5 years later, on a warm August evening. Willa Stanton stood on the same patch of earth where she once sat crying, unsure if she'd made the worst decision of her life. Now. Laughter filled the air. Strings of soft yellow lights hung across the barn, swaying in the breeze. Long wooden tables stretched across the field, lined with homemade dishes, sunflowers in mason jars, and neighbors who had become family. It was the 5th anniversary of Rowan's Hope the Little Farm that almost didn't happen. Willa had invited everyone who helped her build it. Marianne came, of course, beaming with pride and holding the hand of her young grandson. Elliot stood beside Willa, gently nudging her to smile when she looked too serious. The librarian from Grafton, the waitress from the diner, the high schoolers who volunteered during harvest, they all came. Even people who had once crossed the street to avoid her now came with open arms and covered dishes. When the sun dipped low and cast the sky in amber, Marianne stepped forward with a microphone borrowed from the school auditorium. She looked out over the crowd and said, 5 years ago, a girl with nothing walked into this town, carrying more courage than any of us could have guessed, and instead of choosing survival, she chose integrity. Instead of hiding what she found, she gave it back. And in doing so, she gave us all something we didn't know we were missing: hope. She turned to Willa. You didn't just grow food here. You grew something far more powerful: community, faith, and healing. Applause rose up around her like a wave. Willa blinked back tears. Cheeks flushed. I don't have a speech. Willa began when she took the mic, her voice trembling. I'm not good with words like Marianne. I wasn't even sure I could live here when I first showed up. She glanced down, then looked back at the people surrounding her. But you let me. You saw me, and you gave me room to prove I wasn't who the world said I was. She paused, breath catching. I found $2 million buried in the soil 5 years ago. And sure, yeah, that changed things. But not like you'd think. It wasn't the money that made this farm grow. It was a choice. One hard choice when no one was looking. She looked towards the barn, now repainted white with green trim. Flowers grew in neat rows beneath the windows. Chickens clucked in the distance. Children chased each other in the tall grass. I could have stayed quiet. I could have kept it. But that money wasn't mine. That story wasn't mine. And when I let it go, something else took root here. Not crops, not even trust. It was something deeper. She smiled. It was the belief that you are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. The crowd was still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Willa stepped down, and Elliot was waiting. Later that night, long after the crowd had gone home, she stood alone beneath the stars. The land around her glowed under the soft moonlight. She could still see the outline of the hole she had dug years ago, the place where the box had been buried. It was just a field now, freshly tilled, ready for autumn planting. But to her, it was sacred ground. She knelt down and pressed her palm to the soil. Thank you, she whispered. Not just to Silas Rowan, or to her grandfather, or even to the land itself, but to the version of herself who had once been scared and angry and unsure, and who still chose to do what was right. She had planted that decision like a seed. And tonight, she was standing in the harvest. Doing the right thing isn't about getting credit. It's about becoming someone you can live with when no one's watching. Willa Stanton was tested when no one would have blamed her for choosing the easy way out. She was hungry, alone, exhausted, and holding $2 million that could have rewritten her life overnight. But instead of asking what she could get away with, she asked who she wanted to become. In returning the money, Willa didn't just honor a stranger's legacy, she claimed her own. She showed that integrity isn't about perfection. It's about the decision you make when no one would know otherwise. Her courage planted seeds that grew into healing for a forgotten family, for a wounded town, and for herself. If Willa's story moved you, subscribe for more powerful true stories. And if you believe in second chances, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, one quiet decision changes everything.